Yep.
Okay, perfect. All right, so everybody, so far, just a quick recap. What we have heard from Neil is in terms of all the changes that's coming to third-party data, basically, categorically called a cookie ban, right? But it's, of course, it goes a little bit more complicated than that, and it essentially refers to the fact that third-party cookies that of third party essentially who follows you through one website to the next, basically that's going to gradually be blocked out by most of the browsers, right? So most of the browsers are already blocking that, and coming in 2023 is when Google will finally put the nail on the coffin. And so right now what's happening is that the industry in general is really looking at how we can continue to work within the new framework of users' privacy being at the forefront of everyone's concern, but at the same time still retain our ability to actually target and look at relevant content for our users, right? So this is something that I talk to my clients a lot. And by the way, sorry, I didn't introduce myself. I'm Quinn. I'm the Director of Consulting and Client Services in Singapore for Meiro, who's based in Singapore. So we do a lot of implementation of the customer data platform for our clients, which is all over the world, from APAC, Europe, and now very promising, which is coming in Middle East as well. So we see this kind of resurgence of the need for building sustainable solution for marketing and managing the customer interaction basically everywhere. And part of that is really in response to this third-party cookies changes. So let's look at technically what the solution is, right? How do we adapt for the future? So let's just start in a more general view, which is given that the ability to track precisely at the user level is going to reduce gradually. For brand in general, this has massive impact on the way that you do marketing, your marketing strategy, the way that you look at how we are actually adapting our strategy to two separate groups, to your current customers, right, and to your prospective ones. So with current customers, it's really about building loyalty by building a very customer-centric approach, and that requires understanding, integrating data from different sources. And this is where the customer data platform comes in to really unify the customer experience from different sources. So we get behavioral signal, not just from the website, but from every other channels that you are getting the customer behavior, like your customer care, your CRM, your mobile app. And that is the key to understanding the context around how your customers are interacting and making decisions, right? And with regards to building a pipeline for new customers, the prospecting dollars is gradually going to move into search. But as well, how do we move from a prospecting a potential customer to an actual and loyal customer is really by showing and by observing privacy-friendly practices, right? Because this is something that is demanded, not just preferred, but demanded by consumers these days. So where the consent is withdrawn, then there has to be a way to honor that across all of your channels and rely on contextual targeting. So based on not specific information about customers, for example, age and gender and what we know about them, but more around what they are doing on the website based on that time frame and what their intention likely is to be able to serve the kind of content that is personalized and that's relevant at that point of time. So that's in general the how we should rethink this strategy. Now, with third-party cookies, this was really easy because you have a tool that really track consumers around the website, different websites. And this is something that Neil has gone through with us, right? So the idea is that regardless of which site the consumer goes, so typically it could be you go to a news website and then a streaming website and then maybe an e-commerce site and do something. So all of those activities paint a very complete picture about who you are, what you like, what your concerns and preferences are. And with a third-party tracking, which is a domain that has nothing to do with this separate individual website, they were able to look at this ID. Now, earlier, when I mentioned that the browsers are going to block third-party cookies, maybe it's a little bit of a misnomer, right? It's not so much blocking as in the browsers are going to shorten the validity of these cookies, meaning that what's going to happen, in 2023 when Google is going to throw in the towel is that third-party trackers, or third-party cookies are still going to be on the website. However, the expiry is going to be anywhere between 3 days to 7 days to 1 month, depending on the browser. So what that means is that there's a very short duration to track the consumer behavior across the sites. So, after you come back, let's say within 7 days, from the browser's perspective, you are becoming a new person, right? So it's no longer stitched to your old behavior, and therefore the insight of the consumer is going to be completely different. Now, with first-party cookie, then, the key difference is that this validity is going to be a lot longer. If you look at an example of, this is, by the way, Meiro's own website, right? So we, of course, track our own, use our own technology to use first-party cookie to engage with our consumers. So as we can see here with Chrome, which is Google's browser, Meiro user ID, which is a first-party cookie, has the validity of up to 2 years. This was done, I believe, in somewhere around March this year. So 2 years for Meiro cookies as compared to Google's own cookie, Google Client ID, and some other third-party cookie, which is in general, a few days to a few months. With Safari, what we see is a little bit even stricter because Safari is kind of going ahead with this in a very strict format. So we see that a lot of these Facebook's Pixel or third-party cookies here all have the expiry of just a few days to a couple of months out from the day that the cookie was set. And Meiro cookie, the first-party cookie in the bottom here, however, continues to have longer duration. So what this means is that with first-party cookies, you would have a longer duration of history of browsing of your consumers to be able to build understanding of what they do, right? Of course, with first-party cookies, we are not going to know what the consumers do before they come to our website. We are not going to know what they do after they leave our website. And we don't have any business knowing what they do because that's their own privacy and we need to honor that, right? But what the consumers do on your own website is something that is of a valid and legit use case that you should start using first-party cookie for. Same thing with some other condition, right? So essentially how it is done is using our own SDK, which is essentially a tracker that is implemented on the website. This tracker will basically collect all the behavior of the consumer coming to the website. And what is important is that the events that is happening on the website is then sent to a server that the website owner is also the same, also owns the same domain where the server that's collecting the event is. So for all intents and purposes, we are a website owner, we are collecting the behavior of our consumers, of what they do on our own website, and we are also storing and protecting that data. So that is what it means by first-party cookies. Okay, and with all of that information, we also go through a process that's called identity resolution. So that's matching the consumer profile, not only from the website, but also from other sources like in-store offline purchases, like mobile app and CRM, for example, in order to build a single view of the consumer based on, if you notice, these are all the channels and data sources that a brand would own themselves and operate and protect. So there's no third-party data that we are buying or collecting from outside. So that has to form the foundation of your consumer repository. Okay, so with that repository, then we at the same time can continue to look at collecting all the third-party cookies that's associated with the same consumers. So imagine that for a duration of 2 years that I have the Meiro cookies, during that time, my consumers will already have been associated with hundreds of different Google client ID, which is Google cookies, because it expires shorter, right? So at the same time, the consistent profile, the consistent cookies from Meiro is gonna be able to keep this as a consistent profile and allow us to send the relevant IDs to any activation platform where you would need to be able to activate your consumer. So if we are sending to Google Ads, DV360, we are going to have the relevant Google client ID to send that audience. If we are going to send to Facebook, we are going to have the relevant ID, device ID or Google Pixel, Facebook Pixel to send to that audience. Same thing with the Trade Desk, for example, a programmatic tool. So regardless of where you are activating your audience and where you are building your audience, a first-party repository allows you to hold that foundation of first-party cookie that's going to be unchanged, and that gives you the single view of the consumer. And just very quickly through other solutions out there in the market, just for you to understand what your options are as well as marketers, right? So we have the Google's Privacy Sandbox, which Neil partially mentioned earlier. So that includes the federated learning of cohorts that Neil has explained, which is the ability to target and to serve ads, not based on individual consumers, but based on groups of people who are deemed to have similar interest, right? So the Privacy Sandbox is again a privacy standards that include FLoC as well as a few other APIs that does different things, for example, to send aggregated data to or conversion events to the advertisers, right? So all of that lumped together is a privacy sandbox. And what's noteworthy is that it's still very early, it's still in its infancy. FLoC and perhaps the conversion API from Google is a little bit more, are the two components of the privacy sandbox that are a little bit more advanced and are more talked about, but the rest are still, they still have a long timeline to deliver that. And at the same time, interesting news is that this is basically Google's own standard. So it's not all of the browsers will need to comply. So essentially, of course, it's on Google Chrome, but not all browsers are required to comply. And what's interesting is that our team, a lot of us use the Brave browser, which is a privacy-focused browser, but built on the infrastructure of Chrome, right? And even Brave itself, a privacy browser that was built on Chrome, has declined to implement this solution out of the box, right? So that goes to see how much of the general industry is really aligned with this kind of solution that's coming. So that's just interesting to think about, right? So other solutions include just before that, of course, this solution, kudos to Google for trying to come up with a solution that does not target individual users on a person level. And on top of that, we have Unified ID, which you probably have heard the Trade Desk talk a lot about. So this is along the same paradigm of targeting individual consumers and just creating a new kind of IDs on it. So instead of third-party cookies, what if we hash the email, which is going to be unique for each consumer, and use that as an ID that is used for tracking. So it's working on the same paradigm, just a different methodology. So that's a different angle to approach that. And then finally, not finally, because there are a lot of other solutions, but the final one that we are going to talk about is SWAN, which stands for Secure Web Addressability Network. Not so easy to remember. And it's another way to look at this, privacy control altogether. This is more of, it's not a technology per se, but it's more of like a network and a common agreement. So imagine that you have a network of publishers and advertisers who agree to have the same framework, how users are going to give the consent for advertising and storing the data. So, when a user such as yourself go to one of the websites that belongs to this network, and when you give certain consent or when you withdraw your consent, right? So this will be shared with the rest of the network, and everyone is forced to adopt the same thing. So, that's kind of more of an agreement rather than a technology. So, different approach to the same privacy conundrum. But if you think about it, for all of those approach, essentially as a marketer, as somebody who has users, who have people who come to our website, who has the need to provide a very privacy conscious solution to manage users' data, but at the same time provide a very customized and personalized experience for them, then the need for collecting first-party data is still going to be very important. So I'm aware of the time. So before I hand it back to to our case study, which hopefully Rash is back. Can you help me check, Neil? So
yeah,
before,
Rash is here.
So before I go back, just one last thing to kind of summarize, the key point in terms of first-party and third-party cookies is that third-party cookies are on the way out. It's going to be severely limited by the browsers. So definitely as a brand, we would need to start with your first-party data repository. And on top of that is the need to really integrate your customer data with a very resilient solution to build a single consumer view, aka us using the CDP in order to continue to provide a very personalized experience to your consumers. Okay, so